Hey everyone, welcome back to Medieval Historian. In today's episode, we're diving headfirst into the chaotic, nerve-shattering world of ancient Roman party hosting. You think party planning today is stressful? Try pulling off an opulent feast where one wrong toast could end your political career or your life. This isn't your average dinner party. There's no reservation, no playlist, and certainly no cake. Instead, there's flaming dormice, vomitoriums, and a crowd of senators, poets, and distant enemies all judging the shine on your marble floors. Think your cousin's wedding was stressful? Try coordinating a Roman banquet with live animals, poisoned wine, and that one guest who insists on reciting poetry for hours while nude. Today, you stress over charcuterie boards. Back then, you stressed over not getting assassinated with your appetizer. So, before we begin, and before you get too comfortable, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next descent into the past. And tell me in the comments, what city and country are you watching from? And what time is it right now where you are? I'm just a nerd who loves digging into history's darkest corners, and it always blows my mind to see people tuning in from all over the world. You guys make this journey even more amazing. Now let's begin. A day in the life of a Roman party host, and it's worse than you think. The first thing you hear is not birdsong or the gentle hum of a Roman dawn. It's the echo of footsteps in the atrium, the metallic clatter of amphorae being dragged across stone, and the low, throaty voice of your chief house slave shouting instructions that no one seems to follow. Welcome to morning in your domus, if you can call what you're experiencing morning. Really, it feels more like the next circle of punishment. Your mouth is drier than the Forum in August, your tongue tastes like expired fish sauce, and your head is pulsing in time with the fountain in your impluvium. The wine from last night, thick, syrupy, unfiltered, has fermented further in your gut, staging a rebellion your ancestors would have admired. You're not in bed. You're sprawled half-naked across a dining couch in your triclinium, still in your party tunic, which now smells faintly of garum and disappointment. Your feet are dusty, your left arm is numb, and there's a fig squashed under your back. You don't remember how the fig got there, or who played the flute solo that made 3 guests cry and 1 vomit, or how many times the poet recited his ode to the moon, but you're fairly certain it was more than polite society could stand. You manage to sit up, which is a mistake. The pounding in your skull intensifies. Your vision wobbles. Somewhere nearby, someone is already vomiting into a ceramic pot. Could be a guest. Could be a servant. Could be you in 10 minutes. The scent of sour wine, stale perfume, and slightly cooked shellfish clings to the warm Roman air like the memory of shame. Welcome to the day after. You shuffle upright, groaning, and immediately regret every decision that brought you to this point. Your skin is sticky. Your tunic is wrinkled in geometric impossibilities. The mosaic underfoot presses judgment into your bare soles. You stagger past the atrium where yesterday's flower petals now float like funeral confetti in the impluvium pool. A slave bows and offers watered wine with honey, meant to settle your stomach and dull your regret. You take it. It doesn't help. You hear the rustling of scrolls. Your steward already planning tonight's banquet. Because, yes, this isn't a day off. This is preparation day. Again. The kind that starts with a headache and ends with you calculating how much debt a man can realistically survive before having to sell a vineyard or a cousin. Guests are coming. Influential ones, drunk ones, dangerous ones. And the house must look like it was touched by Venus herself, even though you look and smell like you just lost a bar fight in Pompeii. The hangover is not your worst enemy today. The expectations are. You are a Roman host, which means you are part actor, part politician, part culinary hostage. The Senate may run the Republic, But tonight, your household will govern the very illusion of Roman excess. And if that illusion cracks, if a goblet is chipped, or the garum is too pungent, or a senator's wife finds a hair in her dormouse, it could all fall apart. One mistake and your name becomes a joke whispered across baths and dinner couches from here to Baiae. But first you need to vomit again, then bathe, then figure out how to keep the poet from coming back. He's still asleep in your guest room. And he brought a new scroll. The bath chamber is filled with steam and guilt. Not the relaxing kind of steam you dream about after a long day, but the heavy, oppressive haze of a bathhouse built more for spectacle than comfort. You step onto the cold marble floor, clutching your stomach, and brace yourself against a carved column as a slave gently tries to peel your wine-stained tunic off your trembling body. You flinch, not out of pain, out of sheer dignity loss. You are a Roman elite. You've commanded soldiers, negotiated deals, bribed magistrates, and now you're half naked, clutching your guts, about to hurl yesterday's pride into a gold-rimmed basin. Vomiting in marble doesn't make it more elegant, no matter what the frescoes on the walls try to suggest. Your stomach contracts with the violence of a minor earthquake. It hurts, the vomit is sour, gritty, and somehow still contains pine nuts. How many of those honey-roasted pastries did you eat? You don't know. You just know they're back. As are your sins, you wipe your mouth, accept a damp cloth, and slump onto the heated stone ledge. This, they say, is how Romans achieve balance. Clean body, clean soul. But you feel neither. 3 slaves are tending to you now. One massages scented oil into your temples. Another scrapes old sweat and shame from your back with a strigio. The third is trying not to laugh as he rinses a vomit bowl with rosewater. The room smells like lavender, olives, and despair. You sit there, steaming like an overcooked cabbage, while your mind races with the checklist ahead. Food must be sourced, wine diluted, exotic dancers tastefully vetted. You consider postponing. You consider faking illness, but you can't. Not unless you want your name scratched off a dozen patronage scrolls and replaced by that smug merchant Lucius with his imported glassware and suspiciously well-groomed panthers. This is the paradox of Roman luxury. The more you indulge, the more it owns you. You're not the master of your house. You're its most well-dressed prisoner. And today, the sentence is 7 hours of prep, 4 hours of performance, and an eternity of cleanup. You stare into the rising mist and think briefly of the countryside. Simpler days. Olive trees, silence. Then you remember, you hate olives, and silence never served wine. So you rise, wrapped in a linen sheet, oiled, scraped, and mildly hollowed out. Your head is lighter, your stomach calmer. But the weight of tonight hangs over you like a bust of Jupiter. You nod to your steward. The vomitorium phase is complete. It's time to stage a miracle. Once your body is purged and polished, the transformation begins. You shuffle back into your dressing chamber like a half-resurrected senator, only to be greeted by the full theater of elite Roman vanity. Before you can protest, the slaves descend, some kneeling to oil your feet, others standing to perfume your hair. It's not a suggestion, it's a ritual, one you've participated in hundreds of times and still loathe. The air is thick with the scents of myrrh, frankincense, and pressed violets, so heavy it's like inhaling a funeral wreath. You gag slightly, but no one reacts. The silence in the room is absolute, ritualistic, and heavy enough to suffocate a goat. The tunic they dress you in is fresh, pressed, and unforgiving. Fine white linen imported from Egypt, held together with golden fibulae and just enough shame to make it ceremonial. You stretch your arms and it pulls in all the wrong places. Your toga, a status symbol and a social straitjacket, is next. 10 yards of thick, scratchy wool that takes 3 people to wrap, pleat, and pin. It makes you look powerful. It also makes it impossible to sit, breathe, or sweat like a human. You hate it. Everyone does. But without it, you're just another merchant with nice teeth. Your hair is styled in careful waves, perfumed, and dusted lightly with powdered resin. You smell like a walking shrine. Your sandals are polished, your rings are selected, one for each finger you want people to kiss, and just when you think the worst is over, your steward arrives with the guest scroll. He reads it out loud, and your soul wilts with every name. Senators, artists, philosophers, a distant cousin from Ostia you owe money to, and that insufferable epicure who always critiques the salt levels like he's writing a treatise. You want to scream, but your mouth is full of fennel breath paste. Your steward notices your trembling eye and offers a dry date. You decline. There is no such thing as privacy in your house, only levels of silent judgment. Every time a slave brushes lint from your shoulder or adjusts your toga fold, they learn a little more about the inner workings of your dread. They'll never say anything, of course, but they remember. Every twitch, every sigh, every time you mutter "by Jupiter" under your breath while staring blankly at a cushion. They know, and it doesn't matter how many statues you dedicate or poems you sponsor, this is your life now. You are not dressing for comfort. You are dressing for survival. You glance at your reflection in the polished bronze mirror. You look wealthy, respected, dangerous, and completely exhausted. You're not a person. You're a curated illusion, stitched together by fear, debt, and imported oils. Your steward bows. "Shall we begin preparations, Dominus?" You nod. Because what else can you do? You're dressed, you're fragrant, you're barely holding it together. The stage is set. All that's missing now is the disaster. With every breath, your ribs fight against the wool-wrapped tyranny of your own clothing. The toga may be Rome's most iconic garment, but let's be clear, it's also its most sadistic. 10 yards of thick, off-white fabric, pleated and folded into a complex arrangement that's part outfit, part architectural burden. You can't lift your arms. You can't walk fast. You can't even use the toilet without assistance. It's not designed for practicality. It's designed to scream, "This man has too much time, too much money, and absolutely no interest in comfort." The wool itches. It clings in the humidity. It absorbs every drop of sweat like an accusation. By the time you're fully dressed, your skin feels like it's being slowly grated by sandpaper woven by angry gods. You miss your simpler tunic, the one you wear when no one is watching. But tonight, everyone will be watching, especially your peers. And in Rome, clothing isn't about fashion, it's about dominance. The sharper the fold, the cleaner the drape, the more likely you are to be considered a serious man, a respectable man, a man who has never had to flee a party naked after a fire-eater accident. But here's the twist. If you're too fashionable, they'll mock you as effeminate. Too sloppy, and you're labeled a rustic. Too modest, and you're suspected of hiding bankruptcy. Your wardrobe walks a razor-thin line between power and parody. So you settle for the classic, dignified exhaustion. You wrap yourself in state-sanctioned misery and pray that no one notices the frayed hem near your sandals. A toga tear is the Roman version of a social heart attack. The accessories don't help. You're weighed down by rings that pinch, brooches that chafe, and a belt that doesn't so much cinch as it throttles. Your neck aches from holding your head just so the folds drape correctly. And then there's your expression, serene, alert, intimidating. You've practiced it in mirrors, perfected it at funerals. But the truth is, you're baking alive. Every movement is a calculation. If you sit, the toga shifts. If you bend, it collapses. If you sneeze, Jupiter help us all. And yet, this is power. This is prestige. This is what it means to be Roman. You may be sweating through 5 layers of linen, but by the gods, you look like a man who controls grain shipments and writes stern letters to governors. Your guests won't see the discomfort. They'll see wealth, status, and the terrifying possibility that you just might recite a poem before dinner. They'll bow, flatter, gossip, but no one will mention the visible sweat line creeping down your back. Because this fabric prison, is the armor of a host. And tonight, you wear it like a man being slowly strangled by his own reputation. You'd think that a man preparing to host a Roman feast might enjoy a luxurious breakfast, grilled figs, warm honey bread, maybe a cup of goat's milk steeped with herbs. No, absolutely not. Because in the upper echelons of Roman society, eating in the morning is practically a sign of weakness. The truly powerful, they run on spite, ritual, and the fumes of last night's wine. You are one of them, or at least pretending to be. And today, you pretend on an empty stomach. The most you're allowed is a nibble, a crust of hard bread dipped in watered wine. Maybe a fig if you're feeling indulgent. But indulgence is dangerous. The last thing you need is to show up to your own feast with garlic breath or a stomach too full to fake delight when the first roasted dormouse hits the table. So, instead, you sip a bit of warm pasca, vinegar water for the working class, but a surprisingly effective hangover cure, and chew a piece of stale barley bread that might predate the Republic. You do this while pacing your peristyle garden, pretending to reflect on Stoic philosophy but really just calculating how many guests you can uninvite without starting a feud. You pass a marble statue of Bacchus and briefly consider prayer, but it's too early to bribe the gods. Instead, you glare at the servant who offers you honey cakes and wave him away like he's insulted your lineage. Deep down, you want that cake. But deeper down, you remember what happened last time. An unexpected morning nap, followed by a full sweat breakout mid-speech about the nobility of civic duty. Never again. Breakfast, for Romans of your station, is a private embarrassment. The lower classes eat because they work. You suffer for the sake of image. Gluttony before the 10th hour is vulgar. Moderation is noble, even if that moderation is followed by a 12-course bacchanal that ends with a dwarf juggling squid. Self-denial is the appetizer, and no one wants to be seen licking honey from their fingers before noon. That's the social equivalent of declaring bankruptcy. You finally settle into a garden bench. The sun is up, the pigeons are cooing. Your stomach is empty, but your schedule is full. By now, your steward has begun harassing the kitchen. The cook is probably shouting about the lack of pine nuts, and someone's already dropped an amphora of fish sauce. You pop the last piece of bread into your mouth, chewing it like it's a personal insult from the gods. Because in many ways, it is. You're hungry, you're irritable, and you have 12 hours to fake nobility before the first toast. Welcome to Roman restraint, performed with clenched teeth and a growling stomach. There's no formal meeting, no scroll of minutes, no structured agenda. Just you, standing at the center of your atrium like a mildly hungover war general, surrounded by a small army of slaves, stewards, cooks, decorators, and musicians, each one pretending not to be terrified. Your steward, Cassius, reads off the morning's checklist with the serenity of a man who has accepted his fate. He doesn't look up. He knows you're already annoyed. You always are. The garlands haven't arrived. The mosaic floor is still damp from being scrubbed with citrus peels. A crate of oysters meant to impress your Corinthian friend smells suspiciously like Poseidon's revenge. Meanwhile, the poet, yes, that poet, is still passed out in the guest wing and may have soiled the cushions again. You sigh, loudly. Everyone flinches. Good. The cook bursts into the room, face shiny with sweat and contempt. He launches into a tirade about the quality of the flamingo tongues, the unripe pomegranates, and the unforgivable substitution of Egyptian coriander for local herbs. You nod and pretend to listen, even as your mind spirals toward disaster. The wine hasn't been delivered, the musicians are drunk, and the fire eater may have been arrested for inciting a street brawl. Again, you issue commands like lightning bolts from Mount Olympus. The atrium needs more light. Hang mirrors. The garden path must be swept again. Guests will judge the dust. The fountain is to be filled with diluted wine for visual effect, but don't let the parrot near it. That bird remembers things, terrible things, and if it starts repeating phrases like "she wept during dessert," your social capital will evaporate faster than a Greek debt. Everything is urgent. Everything is teetering. You don't manage a household. You manage chaos in a tunic. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is the illusion of it. You want guests to arrive thinking you simply live like this, that the incense wafts naturally, that the lyre player practices daily, and that your cook doesn't routinely threaten to poison your enemies just for sport. You want to impress the senators and terrify the poets. You want your rivals to fake laughter through gritted teeth and then whisper about you all the way back to the forum. Cassius updates you again. The musicians have sobered slightly, the dancers being fitted for a costume that won't offend Jupiter this time. And the leopard, yes, the leopard, is en route, heavily sedated. You rub your temples. The mosaic is still damp. The garlands are late. And somewhere, you know, a scandal is already brewing. But you're the host. And Rome doesn't care how tired you are. It only cares that when the first guest arrives, you're ready. With a smile, a toast, and absolutely no evidence of the screaming match you just had about oyster placement. This is your role, your burden, your performance. Let the games begin. You pace into your atrium with the slow, deliberate steps of a man surveying a battlefield. Or worse, a murder scene. And in a way, it is. The victim? Your reputation. The weapon? A misplaced fig, a cracked floor tile, or an uneven candle flame. Your atrium isn't just the first thing your guests will see. It is the opening argument in the case of why this host deserves influence, praise, and invitations to better parties. It must be flawless, which is why you're walking with narrowed eyes and clenched fists, pausing every few steps to issue rapid-fire commands like a praetor drunk on power. The fountain in the center isn't gurgling, it's wheezing. The statue of Minerva has a stain on her marble robe that looks suspiciously like old wine. A parrot feather drifts through the air and lands in the impluvium like an omen. You turn to Cassius, who winces preemptively. "More rose petals," you mutter. "Double the incense." He nods, he knows the drill. The atrium must smell like wealth and divine favor, not goat hair and mildew. You pause at the mosaic floor, your pride and joy, a depiction of Neptune rising from the sea. Today he looks less like a god and more like a damp librarian. The tiles haven't dried from the morning scrub, and the reflection of the overhead lamps creates a shimmering illusion of sickness. If someone slips and cracks a hip here, you'll be mocked for decades. You order more sand to be sprinkled, discreetly. Don't make it look like you're preparing for combat, even if that's exactly what you're doing. Every object, every color, every scent must whisper control. Even the arrangement of the seating matters. Benches too close together suggest desperation. Too far apart? Arrogance. You pace the atrium like a man rearranging chess pieces in a game with invisible opponents. Your mind runs through every scenario. What if the consul's wife sits under the fig tree and gets bird poop on her shoulder? What if the philosopher and the poet argue again and someone storms off into the fountain? What if someone touches the statue of Apollo and discovers its left hand is being held on with wax? You issue orders with the speed of a general in retreat. Reposition the statues. Place fresh citrus in the corner bowls. Light the first round of lamps, but only the beeswax ones. Tallow smells like fear. And for the love of Vesta, hide the cracked amphora behind the curtain. It belonged to your uncle and smells like wet despair. By the time you finish your circuit, the atrium is glowing with calculated serenity. It looks peaceful, tranquil, serene, as if it's never known stress or haste or broken garlands. And that's the goal. Because tonight, when your guests enter, they'll see calm luxury, and they'll never know how close you came to strangling your steward with a floral chain 5 minutes earlier. That's the art of Roman hosting. The performance begins before the first guest even arrives. From a distance, the atrium now looks divine. You've achieved the visual illusion of harmony. Fresh garlands draped from column to column, petals arranged like offerings to Venus, torches flickering just warmly enough to make everything seem effortless. But step closer, and the illusion cracks like a baked clay mask. The marble sweats from humidity. The citrus bowls attract flies, and underneath the layer of floral fragrance lies the deeper scent of decay. Old wine, used oils, stress. You've perfumed the corpse, but it's still a corpse. Flower petals are the Roman equivalent of throwing perfume on a burning cart. They're beautiful, yes, but they're also desperate. Every handful flung across the marble is another distraction, meant to hide what shouldn't be seen. Cracked plaster behind the fresco, stained couch cushions from last night's poet, a faint yet persistent smell of eel. And you're running out of petals. The second shipment hasn't arrived. Someone sent them to the wrong villa. Your steward is blaming a miswritten address scroll. You blame the gods. A slave appears with a bundle of lavender. You wave him toward the triclinium. The dining couches there still smell like goat cheese and regret. You wanted imported saffron to scent the air. Instead, you're praying no one is allergic to lavender. You circle the edges of the room, lifting cushions, sniffing corners, testing the air like a paranoid bloodhound in sandals. You know where the smells are strongest: under the statue, behind the curtain, near the vomitorium door. That one's always cursed. You issue emergency measures: crushed mint leaves in the brazier, more myrrh on the coals, and for the love of all things imperial, change the tapestry. The one hanging now is supposed to depict a heroic naval battle. Instead, it looks like a drowning chicken surrounded by angry gods. It will be mocked, probably by that painter from Ostia who never shuts up about brushstroke theory. This is your reality, your beautiful prison. You are decorating over rot. But you must never show it. You must present luxury, even if it's stitched over stress and fermented embarrassment. No one must know that the atrium ceiling leaks when it rains, or that the statue of Mercury has a foot held together with beeswax and hope. You collapse momentarily on a bench, watching your slaves scatter like startled pigeons. You breathe in the lavender mint myrrh air of barely contained panic, and remind yourself that appearances are everything. In Rome, perception is reality, and if they smell anything foul, you'll simply claim it's imported from Parthia. There it is, the scroll, unfurled across your lap like a death sentence on imported parchment. Cassius reads each name aloud while you try to keep your expression fixed somewhere between serene confidence and full mental breakdown. It doesn't work. With every noble title and awkward patronymic, a new wave of dread coils around your spine. You stare at the list like a battlefield map, plotting casualties in advance. The problem isn't the quantity, it's the quality. You've invited every person you need to impress, which means you've also invited every person you privately despise. The consul's nephew who once compared your mosaic floor to a wet sponge. The poet who recites erotic verses mid-meal. The senator's wife who speaks only in riddles and brings her own chair. They're all coming, of course they are. You made the list yourself, because Roman politics isn't about liking people. It's about being seen liking them, or, at the very least, tolerating them while dressed in expensive fabric and trying not to commit social homicide. Then there's the wild card guests, the ones added at the last minute. Your cousin from Ostia, recently accused of tax fraud and suspected of seducing his way out of it. A philosopher who drinks too much and once argued with your parrot about the nature of fate. And worst of all, your former lover. Not just any lover, the one who now belongs to another. She's attending with her husband, who happens to control access to a shipping port you desperately need. You feel your stomach twist in time with the name. You sigh and roll the scroll back up. You don't need to memorize the list. These names are etched into your brain now, like a curse scratched into bronze. They carry with them their egos, grudges, appetites, and the unspoken promise that if anything goes wrong, it will be whispered across bathhouses and Senate halls by morning. The sheer logistics are dizzying. You must arrange seating so that the rival poets don't come to blows again. Place the rich but dull equestrian next to someone who can fake interest in wheat tariffs. And God's help you if you seat anyone behind a statue or near the fountain mist. Last time, someone's hairpiece melted mid-toast. This guest list isn't just a roll call, it's a minefield. And tonight, you're not just a host. You're a tactician balancing insult, intrigue, romance, and revenge on a single evening's performance. One wrong move and you could lose patronage, property, or worse, social standing. In Rome, that's almost the same thing. So you sip a small cup of watered wine, say a quiet prayer to Mercury for luck, and give Cassius a slow, bitter nod. Let them come. If you think preparing food for Roman nobility is about taste, think again. It's about status, symbolism, theater, and risk. Your cook has just informed you, with the grim flair of a man announcing a siege, that tonight's wine selection includes 4 varieties. One from Sicily, one from Gaul, one allegedly aged in a jar that sat under a statue of Apollo for a decade, and one so strong it's technically illegal to serve undiluted. You nod and pretend to be impressed, but all you can think is which one is least likely to kill someone. Because that's the game now. You're not just choosing drinks, you're managing survival. If the wine is too weak, your guests will gossip. If it's too strong, they'll riot. One goblet too many, and a senator might confess treason or vomit on the fresco of your grandmother. You consider watering everything down, but that could be seen as stingy. And you cannot appear stingy. Not in Rome. You must drown them in generosity and hope no one drowns literally. Then there's the food. Flamingo tongues, dormice in honey, jellied fish, fig-stuffed entrails. It's all being prepared in your triclinium by a cook whose expression suggests he's halfway through a nervous breakdown. He asks if you'd like the peacock roasted or raw decorated. You ask if either version will prevent assassination. He doesn't laugh. You walk through the kitchen and see oysters being sorted by size, because apparently large oysters indicate wealth, while small ones suggest your ancestors herded goats. An argument breaks out over whether the eel should be soaked in mulled wine or just sprinkled with cinnamon. You leave before you scream. Every ingredient is a performance, every flavor a test. The guests won't taste so much as analyze. And if anything feels provincial, you'll be provincial too. The worst part, you don't even like half this food. No one does. It's exotic for the sake of being exotic. Romans eat to conquer, not to savor. You could serve roasted bricks if you labeled them Iberian earth meat and paired them with spiced wine. And don't even think about skipping the sauce. If your garum, your fermented fish sauce, is too pungent, it's disgraceful. Too mild, it's common. Too runny, and someone will accuse you of being Greek. You nod to your cook. He wipes his forehead. You pour a little of the strongest wine into your goblet. Just a sip. If you're going to be judged tonight, you may as well be buzzed while it happens. Let the culinary war begin. The line between culinary brilliance and total madness is razor thin in your kitchen, and your cook, Gaius, dances along it daily with the swagger of a man who thinks fire is a spice and danger a garnish. He's been with your household for years, long enough to know your worst secrets and how to season around them. But today, his eyes are twitching, his tunic is stained with grease and goat blood, and he's yelling in 3 dialects at once. Which means either the menu is coming together, or the triclinium is seconds away from burning down. You watch him set a tray of lark tongues on fire while arguing with a teenage assistant about the artistic arrangement of quail eggs. If the yolks don't shine like the sun on the Capitoline, you may as well serve peasant gruel, he bellows, flinging a sprig of rue like a dagger. A moment later, he turns to you with a smile and asks if you'd prefer the songbirds caramelized or gilded. You don't know. You just nod. Saying, "Surprise me," feels safer than making an actual choice. The thing is, Gaius is brilliant. He once made a honey-glazed dormouse so delicate it made a visiting senator weep. He can craft edible sculptures, conjure smoke rings from peppered meat, and balance a flaming fig tart on a platter while cursing your entire family tree. But his genius comes with instability. He's unpredictable. He drinks during prep. He quotes Virgil while filleting sturgeon, and sometimes he laughs a little too long at the idea of guests choking on undercooked oyster foam. Right now, he's orchestrating chaos like a man possessed. Honey is being drizzled from absurd heights. A slave with burnt fingers runs past carrying a brazier. A tray of eggs explodes in the corner as Gaius shouts, "Let it burn! It's symbolic!" You stand by the doorway, watching it all unfold, wondering if you should intervene, or simply draft your apology scrolls in advance. He suddenly approaches you with a wooden plate. On it, a single snail, perfectly roasted, resting on a bed of mint leaves and crushed almonds. "Try it," he says, eyes wide. You hesitate, bite, and instantly understand. It's exquisite, frighteningly so. You nod slowly, and he claps his hands, whirls around, and starts screaming for rosewater steam and citrus-glazed boar. Somewhere, something crashes. No one checks. That's the risk of hiring a culinary artist in Rome. You don't just get dishes, you get theater, fire, fear. But if he pulls it off, and he usually does, your guests will remember your feast for years. And if he doesn't, well, that's what backup wine is for at the... You didn't want the goose. Let's be clear, the goose was your steward's idea. A visual centerpiece, he said. An exotic flourish that suggests wealth without arrogance. What you have now is a honking, furious, feathered menace being lovingly groomed by a slave who used to be a harpist. Somewhere along the line, this bird gained a schedule, a handler, and a custom hairpiece. It is no longer livestock, it is a diva. The goose sits on a small pedestal in your garden, flanked by 2 pots of dyed hyacinths. Its feathers have been lightly oiled, its beak polished. There's a silk ribbon tied around its neck, imported from Alexandria, which cost more than your grandfather's funeral. And still, it honks, endlessly, furiously, at everyone, at nothing. You tried removing it earlier. It chased a guest across the atrium and had to be bribed back with candied figs. Now it's being gently fanned by a nervous young boy, who may or may not be developing PTSD. You circle the animal like it's a sacred statue, nodding approvingly for the sake of appearances. You try to forget the fact that last year, a senator's wife was bitten by a swan and sued for emotional trauma. You cannot afford a repeat. The goose is part of the decor now. It is listed on the program. And if anything happens to it, you will suffer the consequences. Not legally, but socially, which in Rome is somehow worse. Cassius assures you it will remain calm during the feast. You glance over as it hisses at a passing slave. "Very calm," you mutter. You ask why it's being dressed in a wreath of marigolds, and Cassius explains it's symbolic of fertility and abundance. You suspect it's just to distract from the fact that you're hosting a party where a goose has better grooming than your third cousin. Then the hairdresser arrives. Not for you. For the goose. She kneels beside it with a box of scented oils and a comb carved from ivory. She hums as she works, smoothing its feathers into a pattern that supposedly resembles a sacred spiral seen in certain Etruscan tomb paintings. You want to laugh, you want to cry, you settle for drinking. At this point, the goose is cleaner than half your guests will be by the end of the night. You've stopped questioning things. Rome is absurd. Prestige is built on symbolism. And today, that symbol is a ribbon-clad waterfowl who may or may not attack a poet during dessert. Of all the things in your household to fear, guest lists, flaming desserts, aggressive poultry, nothing unravels your nerves quite like the garum. This sauce, beloved across the empire, is nothing more than liquefied fish rot, aged in ceramic jars under the sun. And yet, it is the centerpiece of your culinary credibility. Too strong, and it overwhelms everything. Too mild, and you'll be labeled a fraud, and if it smells off, the senators will whisper for months. You approach the amphora like a man confronting a wild animal. It's sealed in wax, tucked in the shaded corner of the kitchen, guarded like a religious relic by 2 slaves and a curtain to shield its scent from sunlight. When the wax is cracked open, the smell hits like a divine punishment. Sharp, tangy, and ancient. One slave immediately retches. Another starts praying. You take a breath and taste a drop on your finger, resisting the urge to weep. It's bold, potent, possibly dangerous. You whisper to the cook, "Cut it with wine, maybe cinnamon." He frowns like you've insulted his lineage. "That's not garum," he hisses. "That's juice." The debate begins. Your cook insists on purity. Garum, as it was meant to be. You insist on restraint. Garum that doesn't cause hallucinations. Back and forth you go, while the sauce bubbles in its jar like it's listening, plotting. You're not even sure who you're arguing with anymore. Him? The fish? The ghosts of hosts past who also lost sleep over fermented anchovies? Eventually, a compromise is reached. A small batch diluted with wine, another undiluted for the elite who enjoy suffering, and a third mixed with honey for the poet who claims it aids his digestion. You nod, exhausted. You've just negotiated a peace treaty with a condiment. But it doesn't end there. Now it must be served. Garum isn't just poured, it's drizzled, with olive wood ladles carved by hand and carried to the table in bowls rimmed with gold. The presentation must scream opulence, even as the smell assaults your guest's dignity. And if anyone spills it, if a drop lands on the senator's wife's toga or seeps into the mosaic, it's over. That smell never leaves. Not clothes, not stone, not memory. You return to your atrium, the scent of fish clinging to your fingertips like a personal shame. You've planned a 10-course feast with dancers and fire jugglers. You've arranged a floral performance by a goose. But it's this fish sauce, this ancestral ooze, that keeps you up at night. Rome is built on law, steel, and tradition. But social ruin, that, my friend, comes in a clay jar of fermented mackerel. They file in with instruments slung over their backs and dread etched across their faces. You can tell they've played enough Roman banquets to know how this goes. Drunken guests, botched poetry readings, impromptu dance-offs, and occasionally being asked to keep playing while someone duels a cousin. The flutists look like they've already argued in the alley. The lyre player is visibly hungover, and the tambourine girl is missing a sandal and most of her enthusiasm. You greet them with strained politeness. They're technically professionals, licensed by the Guild of Performers, paid in coin and possibly leftover goose. You remind them not to start until the guests are seated, not to play anything mournful unless someone dies, and under no circumstances should anyone attempt erotic interpretive dancing unless specifically requested. They nod. They've heard this all before, but the tension is already brewing. One flutist claims his colleague stole his solo from last week's feast in Baiae. The lyre player is tuning a string that refuses to stay in key. The girl with the tambourine keeps muttering about how she once performed for a real emperor who clapped. You walk away before they drag you into their tragedy. Still, they're a necessary evil. Music is crucial. Not because it's enjoyed, but because silence is deadly in Rome. A quiet banquet suggests cheapness. Or worse, lack of confidence. The constant hum of melody keeps guests soothed, distracted, and ideally too enchanted to notice that your peacock roast is still frozen inside. So you assign the flutist to the atrium, the lyre to the peristyle garden, and the percussion to drift between them like an emotional buffer. You offer them wine, watered, of course, and make a few flattering remarks about their last performance. None of them believe you. You don't believe you. But this is diplomacy. You're paying them not just to play, but to pretend that your party is worth playing for. As they begin a rehearsal, a string snaps. The flutist coughs mid-trill. A pigeon lands on the tambourine girl's head. She doesn't flinch. She's been through worse. You sit back, listen to the musical approximation of distress, and remind yourself that these are the professionals. Things will get better, they always do, until someone asks for that old love ballad, and half the room starts sobbing. Amidst the chaos of garum crises, flaming goose grooming, and musical meltdowns, you made a fatal error. You forgot to bribe the doorman, not the slave assigned to open the door. No, the real doorman. The ex-gladiator hired for the evening to manage entrances, intimidate gate-crashers, and lend the air of gravitas that only a man with a broken nose and 4 confirmed kills can provide. His name is Marcus, and he does not like to be ignored. Marcus is standing at your villa's front gate like a vengeful statue, arms crossed, brow furrowed, a face that looks like it was carved from bad intentions. He's wearing a tunic 3 sizes too small and a leather belt with a knife that might technically be a short sword. You spot him just as a merchant guest tries to enter with a gift basket. Marcus stares the man down, says nothing, and the guest turns back, visibly shaken, dropping a jar of olives in his haste. You rush over, smiling, sweating, panicking. "Marcus," you begin, "old friend." He lifts an eyebrow. You offer a handful of coins, a fig, a compliment about his biceps. He remains unimpressed. "You forgot me," he says. 3 words, flat, deadly, honest. You wince. He's right. Last week you promised a bottle of Hispania's finest wine and a private harp performance. Instead, you gave him nothing and assumed he wouldn't notice. Now you must pay. Literally and theatrically. You produce not 1, but 3 bottles of imported wine, 1 still sealed in wax. You promise a front row seat for the fire-eating act. You even offered to name a dessert after him. Marcus's mighty pears. He considers it. Finally, he nods, takes the wine, and shuffles back to his post like a lion reluctantly fed. The gate opens again. Your heart starts beating again. This is Rome. You can insult a senator, misquote Virgil, or even serve warm oysters if you have the right people on your side. But slight the doorman, and your entire night will collapse before it begins. He controls the flow, the image, the tension. He decides if your guests arrive pleased or annoyed, and whether your enemies slip through unnoticed. You walk back inside, the sweat on your back cold now. You mentally add Marcus to your permanent expense list, right after garum, incense, and emotional therapy. Because one lesson is now seared into your mind like a branding iron. In Rome, power is theatrical, and nothing ruins a performance like an angry man at the door with a blade and a grudge. It starts with a low growl, then a yelp. Then someone screams, "It's on a leash!" You rush to the atrium, toga flapping, heart pounding, and there it is, an adult leopard, spotted, muscular, eyes golden as sin, padding across your mosaic floor as if it owns the place. It's wearing a collar made of bronze. The man holding the leash is smiling like he's delivered a punchline. "I thought it might spice things up," he says. "You know this man, Titus Lucilius. He's rich, eccentric, and absolutely immune to shame. Last Saturnalia, he dressed as a Venusian priestess and sang a love song to your statue of Jupiter. This year, he's brought a predator. The leopard eyes the goose. The goose eyes the leopard. You silently pray to every deity available." Cassius whispers in your ear, "We have no policy on exotic beasts." Of course you don't. Because who in their right mind brings a jungle cat to a banquet? Apparently, Titus. And now he's the center of attention. Guests gather, oohing and gasping, pretending not to edge closer to the exits. A senator jokes about needing armor. The lyre player refuses to perform until the leopard is moved at least 3 fountains away. You pull Titus aside, you beg, you plead. He insists the leopard is well-fed and spiritually enlightened. You ask for proof. He gestures vaguely at a scroll in his tunic. You give him your most strained smile and say, "Fine. But if it kills anyone, you're paying for the mosaic." He laughs. You don't. Servants scramble to set up a barrier made of flower pots and decorative shields. One slave is assigned to carry a bucket of wine-soaked meat as a just-in-case distraction. The cook locks himself in the pantry. The goose shrieks, probably swearing in bird speak. You consider canceling the whole thing, but it's too late. The leopard curls up near the dais and purrs. Some guests relax, others eye the exits. Everyone is now deeply, thrillingly uncomfortable. And that's the worst part. It works. The tension, the spectacle, the danger. Your feast just became the most talked-about event of the month. Maybe the year. You've accidentally created legend, and you did it by allowing one man and his spotted death machine into your house. Rome loves drama. And now, thanks to Titus and his emotional support carnivore, you are the epicenter of it. You take a sip of wine, you don't taste it. You're too busy watching the leopard nap and wondering if your insurance covers feline disaster. It begins with sandals on stone, dozens of them. A rhythmic click-clack echoing through the portico as the first guests arrive, draped in togas starched to imperial stiffness and perfumes that precede them by 2 full paces. The doors open, wide and theatrical. A breeze of expectation rolls in with every noble footstep. You stand at the center of the atrium, smile fixed, gut clenched, palms slightly moist. You've rehearsed this, practiced the nods, perfected the eyebrow raise that says, "Yes, I see you. No, I'm not impressed." The entrance parade is not a formality. It's warfare disguised as politeness. Every guest is watching. Every guest is being watched. The procession is as much about hierarchy as it is about presence. Who arrives first? Who arrives last? Who arrives with whom? The senator from Trastevere walks in with his mistress, not his wife. Interesting. The poet enters alone, dramatically late and reeking of rosewater and self-importance. And then the philosopher appears, wrapped in a robe so worn it could be a political statement or just laundry neglect. You offer greetings, kisses, and carefully curated compliments. Your toga is remarkably white. Ah, your speech at the curia. Unforgettable. What a charming accessory, you lie, pointing to a brooch shaped like a squid. Meanwhile, your inner monologue is screaming. The goose has honked 4 times. The leopard has stood up. The garum is sweating through its serving cloth. A slave trips, nearly knocking over a jug of wine. You pretend not to notice. Then, the entrance of all entrances. Flavia Marcia, your former lover. Draped in purple silk, hair sculpted like a goddess, eyes scanning the room like a hawk looking for weakness. On her arm, her husband, the grain lord. His toga alone could feed a village for a year. They glide in. She meets your gaze, smiles, the smile of someone who knows too much. You nod in return, all jaw tension and forced elegance. The applause is real. Some guests clap, others raise goblets in greeting. It sounds warm, but it's not. It's not joy. It's calculation. A test. You've passed for now. The house looks radiant. The lighting is just right. The music is soft, the air thick with lavender and ambition. Everyone's pretending. That's how you know it's working. And yet, beneath the surface, chaos pulses like a drumbeat. One gust of wind, one spilled goblet, one snide comment about the sculpture's missing toe, and the whole illusion could collapse. But you hold your smile, because in Rome, dinner begins with deception, and you are its high priest. The wine is poured, the guests are reclined. The lamps flicker just so. And now it's time for the part that truly tests your resolve, the toasts. What begins as a gentle raising of goblets quickly becomes a verbal battlefield. You lift your own cup, Sicilian red, aged just long enough to be impressive without seeming pretentious, and offer the first toast, to friendship, to the gods, and to the abundance of the harvest. Harmless, safe, predictable. Too predictable. A senator counters with a toast to those who serve the Republic with unyielding courage, which could be about anyone, or could very much be about not you. A merchant adds, and to those who pay their debts on time, which garners a few chuckles and one cough that sounds suspiciously accusatory. The poet raises his goblet and declares, to love unrequited, but never unremembered. Several guests glance your way. You keep your face neutral, your jaw tight. Then the philosopher clears his throat. Everyone tenses. He's known for turning toasts into multi-act tragedies. To the fleeting nature of life, the illusion of status, and the hollowness of luxury built upon the bones of the poor. Silence. Absolute silence. Until the leopard growls softly, as if agreeing. Nervous laughter ripples through the room. Someone coughs. A flute player hits a sour note. You respond with a subtle pivot. And to philosophy, which reminds us that thought without action is but wine without water, heady and dangerous. A few people nod, the tension dips, crisis averted. For now. But toasts aren't done yet. Oh no. Because now the ex-general, who's already 3 goblets deep, rises and slurs. To Rome, May she outlive us all, and may those who betray her rot in exile. Cheers erupt. But who are the betrayers? That's the question now circling every mind. You raise your cup again, not to toast, but to hide your expression. This is the danger of Roman banquets. The toasts are not just gestures. They're social barbs, veiled threats, romantic jabs, and political tests, all wrapped in polished phrasing. One misstep, one wrong laugh, one too long glance, and you're branded. A traitor, a weakling, a fool. So you toast back, carefully, politely, strategically, all while your pulse races and the poet winks, and your former lover sips her wine with the smug grace of a woman who knows you can't retaliate. Not here. Not tonight. Welcome to the toast circle, where words have weight and silence can be fatal. In theory, the Roman way of dining is leisurely, reclining on soft couches, nibbling delicacies, sipping wine between thoughtful conversation and controlled laughter. In practice, it's agony disguised as elegance. You ease yourself onto your assigned lectus, a plush, overstuffed monstrosity positioned beside the lowest-ranking senator and a man who smells like heated olives. The moment your back touches the embroidered pillow, you remember why this is your least favorite part of the entire tradition. There's no such thing as graceful reclining. You must balance sideways, leaning on one elbow, with your legs crooked and your spine twisted like an overcooked eel. It looks elegant from a distance. It feels like slow-baked torture. The couch creaks beneath you. The decorative bolster digs into your ribs. Someone behind you has already kicked off a sandal and is pressing a bare foot against your calf like you're sharing a marriage bed. The server approaches with the first platter, stuffed figs glazed in honey and sprinkled with crushed pine nuts. You reach out, twist at the wrong angle, and feel something in your shoulder pop. You smile through it. This is Rome. Pain is just another way to prove your superiority. Besides, you're not the only one suffering. The poet's toga is riding up. The general is snoring between courses, and the merchant's wife just dropped a pickled onion into her cleavage and is pretending it never happened. You glance around the triclinium. The couches form a U shape, symbolizing unity and status. In reality, they create a social trap from which there's no easy escape. If you try to get up, you must unfold your legs, push off a slick cushion, and avoid dragging half the tableware with you. So you don't. You stay put, you recline, you endure, you pray. Then comes the jug of wine. A slave pours into your goblet with reverence as if baptizing you into a cult of fermented regret. You sip. It's warm. Overly sweet. Possibly cut with vinegar. You nod anyway. Guests watch how you drink, what you eat, how often you chew. You must look appreciative but not gluttonous, engaged but not desperate. It's not a meal, it's a ceremony, a test of restraint, posture, and pelvic flexibility. The worst part? You miss chairs. Real chairs. With backs and legs and the option to sit like a person instead of reclining like a broken marionette. But chairs, you're told, are for barbarians. And tonight, you're a Roman host. Which means you recline in pain, maintain polite conversation, and occasionally pretend your left arm isn't going numb. So you shift slightly, smile thinly, and accept another platter of roasted dormice. You may never feel your elbow again, but at least you look elegant while slowly losing circulation. The feast has just begun, but your mind is already slipping. Names blur, titles mix. Is that Senator Vibius or his brother? Was that the daughter of the consul or a very expensive courtesan? You nod, smile, and fake familiarity with a precision born of years hosting. But there's one name you cannot forget. The name that haunts the back of your mind like the scent of spoiled garum. Flavia. She sits across the room, perfectly positioned in your line of sight. Draped in that violet silk, she seems carved from legend. Effortless, radiant, and entirely uninterested in your presence. Her laugh rises above the music like a soft blade. Her husband, oblivious, is boasting about grain tariffs while she picks at a bowl of olives with divine apathy. You try not to watch. You fail. Everyone else here is a blur of togas, smiles, and careful ambition. But she stands out like a prophecy unspoken. And it's maddening. You remember things you shouldn't. How she took her wine, how she tilted her head when amused, how she once whispered political strategies into your ear while adjusting her earring. You also remember how it ended, with silence, distance, and an invitation to her wedding you never opened. Now, she's here, in your house, laughing, smiling, glancing at you just enough to unsettle every muscle in your body. Every time someone says Flavia, your heart forgets its job. You cling to other names to distract yourself. The senator beside you is Lucius? No, Gaius? You call him old friend just to be safe. A noble woman waves from the far couch. Cornelia, Aurelia. You respond with a vague toast. Anything to avoid slipping. Anything to keep from saying her name aloud. Because if you do, if you even acknowledge her presence verbally, it becomes real. And real means vulnerable. Real means remembered. Real means every other guest sees through the performance and understands that tonight you are not in control. You are haunted. And in Rome, ghosts are bad for business. So you sip your wine. You nod to a guest who's quoting Catullus badly. You pretend that the woman across the room hasn't already ruined your appetite. And when someone asks, "Do you remember Flavia from the games last spring?" you laugh and say, "Who?" Because in this city of masks, the one you wear best is indifference. The first course arrives with all the ceremony of a military procession, plumes of steam, silver trays, and the unmistakable air of theatrical dread. What lands in front of you is not a meal, it's a confrontation. A giant silver dish bearing something that once had eyes, spines, and possibly opinions. A stuffed mullet, mouth agape, teeth visible, garnished with parsley sprigs and what might be rose petals or what might be bait. You've hosted dozens of feasts. You've seen your share of culinary madness. But tonight's opening salvo is a masterpiece of edible menace. The mullet is flanked by smoked eels arranged to form a circle, symbolizing eternity or indigestion, depending on how you interpret the chef's cryptic intent. A single snail is perched atop the mullet's head like a crown. You do not ask why. The guests lean in, intrigued and horrified. The poet applauds. The general squints. The philosopher mutters something about divine punishment. A slave carefully slices into the fish's side, revealing a stew of pomegranate seeds, minced dates, and shredded chicken hearts. You realize with a lurch that the fish has been stuffed with other animals. The layers of metaphor are dizzying. You pick up your spoon and try to look brave. A bite later, your mouth is flooded with a mix of sweet, sour, and textureless terror. It's not bad, but it's not good. It's challenging. You smile, nod. Ah, the cinnamon was a bold choice. The cook, watching from the archway, beams like a lunatic. Around the table, guests murmur their reactions. Unexpected. Complex. Bold. All words that mean, I'm not sure what just happened in my mouth. And this is only course 1. Next comes the dormice. Roasted, honey-glazed, stuffed with crushed walnuts, and served in miniature sarcophagi. The senator beside you makes a pun about resurrecting flavor. You laugh politely while internally rehearsing your will. Then a squid dish, braised in red wine and wrapped around pickled onions like a sea monster giving itself a hug. The poet declares it inspirational. You begin sweating. The food isn't trying to nourish. It's trying to make a point. That point is unclear. Possibly, you will respect this suffering. Possibly, you will remember this tomorrow in vivid gastrointestinal detail. You push a small plate of ox tongue aside and pretend to be enraptured by the lyre music. This is Roman haute cuisine, designed not to feed, but to challenge, impress, and occasionally traumatize. And you, dear host, must appear delighted, even as you chew something that might be jellyfish or might be a philosophical prank. Because if the food defeats you, so does the night. There are many unspoken traditions at a Roman feast, timely toasts, poetic interludes, competitive gossip, but none are as quietly accepted and universally dreaded as this: the vomitorium ritual. And no, it's not what outsiders think. You don't dine in the vomitorium. You visit it discreetly between courses to lighten the load. By course 3, the eels are returning for vengeance. The honeyed dormice have begun staging a rebellion somewhere in your upper gut. You feel the pulse of pressure, the subtle yet insistent squeeze of regret. Around you, guests begin to excuse themselves politely, one by one, with the practiced calm of people who know exactly what they're about to do behind a mosaic curtain. You rise, carefully. Too fast, and you risk disaster. You mutter something about checking on the harpist. No one questions it. The path to the vomitorium is lined with perfumed braziers and artfully arranged scrolls, as if anyone could read in their condition. A slave waits at the door, avoiding eye contact. Inside, bowls, basins, and a faint hint of mint and myrrh. A single fresco on the wall depicts a man leaning over an amphora. Tasteful. Ironic. You kneel, you breathe, and then freedom. It's not pleasant, but it's necessary. A reset. A purge in the service of continued decadence. You wipe your mouth, rinse with wine-infused water, and whisper thanks to whatever gods invented this blessed, shame-soaked system. Back at the table, everyone looks slightly lighter, slightly pinker, slightly smug. They've emptied themselves and made room for the next culinary monstrosity. A fresh platter arrives, goat stuffed with apricots, glazed with mustard, and garnished with rosemary and judgment. You take a bite and smile. You've survived the purge. You've earned this next round of discomfort. The poet raises a toast to the resilience of the Roman gut. Everyone laughs, slightly too loud. You glance at the vomitorium door. 2 more guests have slipped away. One is singing softly. Another returns with a wiped mouth and new resolve. This is how Roman feasts operate. Food in, pride out, stomach empty, plate full. You don't eat for hunger. You eat for honor. And when honor becomes too heavy, you excuse yourself, purge it quietly, and return before anyone misses you. It's not about gluttony. It's about performance. Controlled collapse. And tonight, you are winning, sort of. The room darkens slightly. Lamps are dimmed, incense thickens, and music takes a sultry turn. You hear the distinct rattle of ankle bells and catch the shimmer of gold-threaded fabric at the edge of the atrium. Guests shift. Voices hush, and the dancer enters, graceful, barefoot, and very possibly dangerous. She twirls with effortless elegance, her wrists encircled with bronze bangles that clink in time to the beat of the flute. Her eyes are painted heavily with kohl, her smile faint and unreadable. She doesn't look at the food, she doesn't look at the musicians. She looks at the guests and lingers a little too long on the senators, and the poets and you. There's something off, something calculated. Her dance is perfect, too perfect. Her turns are sharp, her balance immaculate, her expression placid but observant. She's not just entertaining. She's assessing, cataloging, memorizing who's sitting where, who's speaking to whom, who's drinking too quickly. This is not uncommon in Rome. Dancers are often courtesans. Courtesans are often informants. And spies? Spies go where the food and the power are served on the same tray. You sip your wine slowly, masking your own, watching behind a practiced smirk. Around you, the guests are enjoying the show with various levels of restraint. One equestrian is openly drooling. The general tries not to blink. The philosopher mutters something about the fleeting beauty of mortal form and nearly knocks over a brazier. She moves through the triclinium like a shadow. At one point, she dances behind you. You feel her breath near your neck. Intentional or theatrical flourish? She places a flower beside your cup, brushes your shoulder, then disappears into the far side of the room, hips swaying in rhythm with the rising tempo. Cassius leans in. "We didn't hire her," he whispers. Your spine straightens. "Who did?" He shrugs. "She came with the senator's party." Of course she did, the senator whose allegiances shift like dice in a bowl. You glance at the flower she left. Jasmine. Not native. Expensive. Symbolic of secrecy. You consider sending a slave to follow her, but what then? Exposing a spy ruins the mood. And in Rome, some secrets are safer when left undisturbed. You smile, sip your wine, let her dance. If she's gathering intelligence, let her gather. It's not like you're hiding anything, except everything. Every Roman banquet hits a point where conversation slides into philosophy, sometimes gently, sometimes like a chariot careening off a cliff. Tonight, it begins with a question. What is the nature of the soul? Simple, harmless. Until the poet responds, a flame ever flickering. Then the philosopher scoffs. A flame? That's poetry, not substance. And just like that, the room splits into camps. The Epicureans argue for pleasure. The Stoics call them cowards. Someone quotes Plato, mispronounces half of it, and is immediately corrected by a drunk magistrate with a speech impediment. You sit back and watch the intellectual equivalent of a knife fight in a bathhouse. Voices rise, gestures sharpen. The table becomes a battlefield of ideas, half-remembered quotes, and aggressively flung figs. The general slams his goblet and demands silence. The poet calls him a dull-witted thug. The dancer slips out quietly, wisely avoiding the crossfire. Philosophy Hour is a tradition, a blood sport with laurel crowns. It's not about truth, it's about dominance, about who can speak the longest, the loudest, and with the most obscure references to things no one actually read. You, as host, are expected to moderate. But moderation is no longer an option. The senator is on his third rant about divine order. The philosopher just climbed onto a bench to yell about free will. You clap twice. No one notices. You try to inject a joke. It lands like a dying pigeon. Finally, you signal to the musicians, louder, louder. The music swells awkwardly around the shouting. A servant walks by with wine. Another with citrus peels. Nothing works. Philosophy is loose, and Rome is listening. And then the breakthrough. One of the guests, red-faced and furious, shouts, "The soul has no nature. We invent it." Silence. Pure, sudden silence. Even the leopard lifts its head. Everyone stares. The man blinks, realizes what he said. Then the laughter starts. Nervous. Relieved. A few guests applaud. You exhale so hard your ribs pop. Crisis averted. For now. The philosophy fades into smirks and sips. The topic shifts to politics, somehow less dangerous. You refill your cup and remind yourself, Every feast must contain one near-debate-induced riot. It's tradition. And tonight, tradition has been thoroughly, gloriously upheld. The moment you hear the scrape of a stool and the exaggerated clearing of a throat, you know it's happening. The poet is standing. His tunic artfully disheveled, his hair oiled to oblivion, one sandal half off for dramatic flair. He raises a scroll in trembling hands, eyes half-lidded like a man overcome by his own genius. You brace yourself. Everyone else does too. Even the leopard sighs. He opens with a tribute to the sad, aching moon, a celestial body he compares, twice, to an unfaithful lover. Then, inexplicably, to a baked pear. You glance around the table. The senator's jaw is clenched. The general is asleep. A merchant is silently mouthing, "No, no, no." But no one stops him, because this, like plague and property tax, must be endured. The poem continues, each line more tortured than the last. Something about a nightingale and destiny, something else about wine and the softness of destiny's thighs. You stop listening around stanza 7 and start planning your next life as a shepherd far from Rome. He's on fire now. Metaphors are being flung like flaming javelins. Someone coughs loudly. He ignores it. A dish of oysters is passed over him mid-verse. He keeps going. Then comes the inevitable. He locks eyes with her. Flavia, of course. His voice softens. He speaks of violet eyes and the unbearable tenderness of memory. The room shifts. Some guests glance at you, others pretend they haven't noticed the target of his poetic affection. You smile. You sip. You hope lightning strikes. And still, he reads. The scroll rolls downward like an execution order. His voice rises and falls in practiced waves. At one point he weeps, not convincingly but wet enough to be impressive. A slave sneezes. Someone drops a spoon. Still, the poem rages on. By the end he is hoarse. The scroll is spent. He bows with theatrical humility. A few guests clap, polite, relieved. You join them, your hands slow, measured, full of imagined violence. You nod, you say, beautiful. Because in Rome, lying about art is not just expected, it's patriotic. He returns to his couch, beaming. The dancer rolls her eyes. The philosopher mutters something about aesthetic decay. Flavia does not react, which makes it worse. You finish your wine and signal for more, because there's nothing quite as humbling as realizing you spent a fortune to feed 50 people, and now everyone's main memory of the evening will be a third-rate moon simile. In the middle of the brief lull that follows the poet's emotional disaster, it happens. The parrot, perched high on a brass stand near the open window, flutters its wings, tilts its head, and says clearly, confidently, and with perfect timing, he begged her to stay on his knees. Silence. There are moments at Roman feasts when everything feels orchestrated. Moments when music, light, and laughter combine into the perfect hum of luxury. This is not one of those moments. This is a trapdoor swinging open beneath your soul. You freeze. So does everyone else. A few guests blink. One snorts. The general looks confused. The philosopher murmurs, "Truth always finds a tongue." You mentally calculate whether defenestrating a parrot counts as sacrilege. The bird flaps, then repeats. She left anyway. Wore purple. Laughed. The guests gasp, or pretend to. Everyone is suddenly very interested in their wine. The senator leans over to his wife and whispers something that sounds like Flavia. You die a little. You knew the bird was dangerous. Parrots are more than exotic decor in Rome. They're recorders. They pick up everything. And yours has been living in your atrium for years, absorbing political secrets, personal regrets, and now apparently your most humiliating romantic episode. You had hoped it had forgotten. You were wrong. Cassius appears beside you, whispering, "Shall I remove it?" You shake your head slowly. Doing so would be a confession. So instead you chuckle, loudly. "Ah, he's quoting one of the poet's earlier works," you lie. A tragic piece, overwrought. The poet blinks in betrayal. You cut him off with a refill of wine. Crisis managed? Not quite, because now the parrot starts laughing, your laugh. A perfect mimicry. Guests chuckle nervously. The dancer bites her lip. Flavia hides behind her cup, eyes glinting. The bird is still going. Why doesn't she love me? Why doesn't she love me? Now it's just being mean. You stand, raise a goblet. To clever birds. Everyone laughs, applauds. The parrot mimics the applause, flapping like a miniature disaster with feathers. You sit back down, flushed, rattled, barely breathing. You've dodged a dagger, but you can feel the whispers taking shape around the table. Stories will spread, twisted, embellished, eternal, and it all started with a bird that remembers too much. Because apparently nothing screams Roman refinement like the potential for third-degree burns, the fire juggler is announced. You gave your steward explicit instructions, no fire inside, but he swore the man was highly trained, very discreet, and insured by Mercury himself. So here you are, standing near your finest tapestries, watching a man in a singed tunic spin 3 flaming clubs under your ceiling of cedar beams. The guests clap with cautious delight. The leopard growls softly from its corner. The goose flutters its wings. And you? You stand with a fixed smile and the bone-deep realization that this could very easily become your most memorable banquet for all the wrong reasons. The performer starts slow. Simple tosses, small arcs. The torches spin through the air, the flames dancing like particularly smug spirits. The crowd ooze. One senator mutters, "Brave or stupid?" You nod sagely, as if you know which. Then he takes it up a level. He juggles behind his back, between his legs, while spinning in a slow circle like a human menorah. Guests start to lean forward. A drunk merchant cheers. A poet shouts, "Yes, give us metaphor," and then promptly spills a bowl of olives into his lap. The danger escalates when he adds a 4th torch, then a 5th. You can see the sweat now, on his brow, on your steward's brow, dripping from the nose of a noblewoman who has stopped blinking. And then the juggler jumps. Why? Why is he jumping? He lands. The torches fly. One clips a curtain. You inhale sharply. A slave is already there with a wet cloth, smothering the spark before it can become legend. The performer pretends it was part of the act. He bows mid-spin. Your heart races at the speed of treason. He finishes by tossing all the torches high in the air, catching each one in perfect rhythm, then holding the last flaming club overhead like a gladiator demanding mercy. The guests erupt in applause. Some of it is genuine. Most is relief. You nod, smile, sip, then whisper to Cassius, "Get him out, now. Because one more performance like that and you'll need a new atrium or a new city." The music is playing. The conversation is buzzing again. Things, against all odds, are returning to a rhythm. And then it happens. A cough, sharp, urgent. Then another, wetter, more frantic. A figure in the corner leans forward, hands at throat, eyes wide. A fig has declared war. It's the merchant from Ostia. Round-faced, overly confident, and now very, very purple. Guests look up, freeze. One woman gasps. A philosopher whispers, "Such is the fragility of life." Useless. Your steward moves quickly, but not quickly enough. The man's chair tips as he flails. A bowl crashes to the floor. The parrot screeches. The leopard lifts its head. The fire juggler, still nearby, backs into a curtain and nearly sets it ablaze. Again. Cassius rushes to the man and delivers a thump between the shoulders. It does nothing. A second thump, still nothing. Then a senator, of all people, stands and calmly applies pressure under the ribs. 1, 2, 3. On the fourth heave, the fig flies from the merchant's mouth, bouncing across the mosaic floor like a divine insult. Silence, then coughing, wheezing, and finally breathing. Everyone exhales. The merchant slumps forward, pale and glistening. A servant rushes over with water and a clean napkin, which he uses to dab his forehead with the dignity of someone who has absolutely not just choked on fruit in front of Rome's most powerful. You clear your throat. "To figs," you say. Nervous laughter, then applause. Even the leopard seems vaguely impressed. But the spell has broken. The energy has changed. Guests whisper behind hands. The near-death moment has sobered the room more effectively than a rationing order. You gesture for music to resume. The flutist, still shaking, begins a soft, cautious tune. You didn't want a quiet night, but this is too quiet now. Everyone's watching their plates a little too carefully, chewing a little too thoughtfully. You watch as the parrot eyes the merchant and says, "Spit it out." You make a mental note. Remove that bird. Burn the fig bowl. And maybe start screening for guests with weak throats. Because in Rome, a dinner party is only one figs away from becoming a funeral. It starts small, barely noticeable. A quick movement near the wine trays. A flick of fabric. A hand withdrawn a second too late. You catch it out of the corner of your eye. The youngest of your wine servants, lean and fast, sliding something from the senator's personal pouch just as he refills the goblet. You blink, look again. The slave is gone, vanished into the torchlight and silk drapes like a trained illusionist. You sit back, swirling your wine, eyes scanning the room. Theft is not unusual in Rome, not among the elite, and certainly not in the kitchens and corridors of a busy house. But stealing from a senator? During your feast? That's not just bold, that's suicidal. Cassius appears behind you as if summoned by your panic. "You saw it too?" he whispers. You nod. "What did he take?" Cassius shrugs. "Something small. Could have been coin, a seal, a ring." The senator hasn't noticed yet. He's deep in conversation with the general, laughing too loudly and gesturing with his cup. But the moment he discovers the missing object, if he discovers it, this party becomes an investigation, or worse, an execution. You scan for the slave again. Nothing. You consider raising the alarm, but what's your play? Interrogating the staff mid-feast would draw attention. Apologizing in advance would raise suspicion. And framing someone else? Risky, even for you. So you opt for the most Roman solution possible. Pretend nothing happened, and handle it later. You whisper to Cassius, "Shadow him. If he leaves the atrium, stop him." Cassius nods and vanishes like fog. You exhale and force a smile as another guest approaches to compliment your cheese board. Inside, you're screaming. Because this is Rome in a nutshell. Luxury balanced on treachery. Gold beside greed. Silk wrapped around secrets. You can build the perfect house, hire the perfect chef, host the perfect night, but one nimble-fingered servant can ruin it all. A few minutes later, you see the slave again, carrying figs, smiling politely. Innocent, too innocent. You resist the urge to throw your goblet. Cassius gives you a subtle nod from the shadows. He's watching, and that will have to do, for now. You sip your wine, glance at the senator, and pray he doesn't go reaching into his pouch any time soon. Because if he does, there will be yelling, blame, blood, and you, as host, will be responsible for every last drip of it. The main courses are over. Plates have been cleared. Guests are reclined in varying degrees of fatigue and wine-induced hallucination. It is time for dessert, traditionally the gentlest, most joyful part of any feast. But in your villa, dessert is a test. A final, glorious insult to digestion, a sugar-coated gauntlet hurled at the stomachs of your peers. The dish arrives on a litter carried by 2 trembling slaves. It's shaped like a chariot, a pastry chariot. Inside is a roasted pear, stuffed with candied dates, encased in a crust of almond flour and drizzled with honey imported from Crete. But that's not all. Perched atop the pear is a marzipan dormouse, wearing a tiny golden helmet. And beside it, as garnish, a sugar sculpture of Vesta's temple, complete with miniature candlesticks that are, of course, lit. The table gasps. The general claps. The poet weeps. The philosopher mutters, "This is blasphemy." You beam, because this is your finale, your victory. A dessert so absurd, so excessive, it demands attention even as it threatens collapse under its own symbolism. Slaves begin slicing the chariot delicately, trying not to decapitate the dormouse. Guests lean in, forks raised, eyes gleaming. And then, inevitably, disaster. One of the candied candlesticks tilts. Wax runs. A nearby sugar column softens. A mini roof caves in, taking a dormouse ear with it. The guest beside it yelps and clutches her pearls. A senator shouts, "It's attacking!" A sugar chunk hits a goblet. The parrot screams. You leap to your feet. "It's part of the presentation," you lie. "A statement on impermanence." The guests pause, consider, then applaud. You sit back down, sweating. Dessert continues, now slightly collapsed but still edible. You take a bite. It's perfect. Pear soft, crust crisp, sugar shockingly subtle. You chew with reverence and fear. But not all guests are impressed. The dancer politely refuses. The general pokes it with a knife, grunts, and drinks more wine. The philosopher delivers a long soliloquy about the futility of sweetness. And yet the poet writes a haiku on his napkin. So, mixed reviews. You lean back, look over your ruined but celebrated creation, and smile. Because dessert in Rome isn't about pleasure, it's about power. If your guests are too stunned to criticize, if they talk about it on the Palatine tomorrow, if someone dreams about it next week, you win. And that's the sweetest taste of all. It happens so smoothly, so insidiously that for a moment you almost believe it's real. Your oldest rival, Lucius Septimus, the man who once publicly referred to your villa as a tasteful ruin, leans across the table, raises his goblet and says, "Truly, this has been an unforgettable evening. You've outdone yourself." Your first instinct is pride, brief, fleeting, followed immediately by a wave of nausea. Because in Rome, compliments from enemies are never just compliments. They are strategies, traps, preludes to betrayal. When Lucius praises your feast, he's not acknowledging your success. He's marking it, packaging it up, adding a ribbon of venom, and preparing to present it tomorrow at the baths as gossip wrapped in a grin. You nod, accept the compliment with a gracious smile, and a hollow laugh. Too kind, you say. You know how difficult it is to get decent figs this season. He chuckles, and yet yours were so expressive. What does that mean? You don't know. He doesn't know. But it's already planted in the minds of half your guests. The room, still glowing with sugar and wine, watches this exchange closely. They know this dance. Lucius only praises what he plans to dismantle later. Every word from his mouth is a blade wrapped in velvet. And now everyone wonders what he'll say tomorrow, when you're not around to control the story. Cassius appears beside you. He's been speaking with the poet in private. Of course he has. That poet, whose ode to figs was suspiciously detailed. You begin to connect dots that haven't even been drawn yet. Tomorrow there will be rumors that the figs were imported illegally, that your garum was from Carthage, that the dancer was your mistress, that the parrot is a political metaphor. Lucius leans back. He's smiling like a man who's just poisoned a well. Also, your goose was remarkable, almost regal. Now he's complimenting the bird? You're certain you're doomed. You return the favor. And your tunic, so brave, most men wouldn't dare. He smirks. A senator snorts. The game is on. You've hosted a flawless evening. Almost. But Lucius doesn't need facts. He needs whispers, and Rome thrives on whispers. You clink goblets. The sound is sharp. Final. And just like that, you realize your greatest threat wasn't the fire, or the parrot, or the leopard. It was this man, smiling at you across the table. It was watered down. You swear it was watered down. That's what you told the slaves. That's what the amphora label claimed. Light-bodied, notes of plum, mild potency. Lies. Absolute lies. Because right now your guests are melting into their couches like wax figurines and the room sounds like a chorus of misplaced musical instruments. The poet is singing, loudly, off-key, about grapes. The senator's attempting to toast his sandals. The philosopher is asleep in a bowl of mint sauce. You look around and realize the wine has turned the entire feast into a scene from a particularly unhinged Bacchic rite. This was not the plan. You wanted tipsy, witty, politely intoxicated. Not whatever this is. One guest is crawling beneath the table in search of the lost spirit of Rome. Another is drawing symbols in spilled honey with his finger, claiming divine revelation. The parrot is mimicking snoring sounds. The leopard looks bored. You motion to Cassius. Check the amphora, you hiss. He returns minutes later, pale. It's Thracian, he whispers, aged under volcanic ash, possibly fermented with opium. Wonderful. You've just served philosopher-grade insanity wine to a room full of people whose reputations teeter on the edge of rumor and reflux. You try to contain the damage. You order fruit platters, sober snacks, more water, something, anything, to slow the descent. But it's too late. A noblewoman stands to deliver a toast and promptly faints into a platter of pine nuts. The general starts an argument with a statue of Mercury. The poet's toga has slipped dangerously south. And then it hits you. No one will remember the food, or the music, or even the parrot's betrayal. They'll remember this, the wine. The night the host served madness in clay jugs and turned his villa into a Dionysian fever dream. You can't decide whether to scream or join in. You settle for another sip. It's delicious. The door opens. Again. You barely notice. Half the guests have arrived late and left early, some twice. But this one is different. The air shifts. The conversation stalls. You look up, and there they are. Your lover. Well, former lover. Recent. Painfully recent. And on their arm, a merchant from Carthage whose idea of charm involves loudly announcing grain prices and mispronouncing Latin like it owes him money. She's radiant, of course. Hair arranged in the latest Eastern style, tunic dyed a shade of red so deep it seems to hum. She sees you, smiles, a smile that says, "I'm doing perfectly fine without you." Her new companion offers a clumsy bow. You resist the urge to throw a candied date. Cassius appears at your side. Shall I seat them near the mosaic fountain, or far, far away? You take a long sip of wine. Put them by the goose. Cassius nods, understanding completely. You watch as she glides through the atrium, trailing compliments, turning heads. Her new lover trips on a step. No one helps. She doesn't look back. You almost feel bad for him until he starts talking about his exotic cheese empire, loudly. You try to focus on conversation, food, anything else, but your eyes keep drifting. She's laughing now, not just any laugh, your laugh, the one she used to give you when you quoted poetry badly, which means she's faking it. For him. Your goblet is empty. A slave refills it. You stare at the wine, wondering if it's possible to drown quietly in a single gulp. Across the room, Flavia sees you watching. She raises her glass. A toast without words. You match it, smiling through cracked teeth. It's not jealousy, it's strategy. Everyone's watching, everyone knows. In Rome, love is politics, romance is theater, and heartbreak? That's just bad optics. So you pivot. You flirt with the senator's niece. You laugh, louder than necessary. You arrange for the musician to play her least favorite song. She notices. Her smile falters. Slightly, victory. You may have lost her, but you will not lose the room. It begins, as most disasters do, with a boast. The Carthaginian merchant, yes, him, starts bragging about his cheese. Not figuratively, literally. Aged in clay, buried in salt, carried by donkey over 4 mountains, he declares, brandishing a wheel of it like a holy relic. The flavor is unmatched. A Roman noble scoffs. We age ours in ash and feed the cows fermented wheat. The merchant snorts. Your cows eat dirt. Silence. Tension. The poet whispers, "This is going to be delicious." A challenge is issued. Not a duel of swords, but of palate. The 2 men rise, stumbling slightly, and demand a tasting. A servant produces knives. Plates are cleared. A crowd gathers. The parrot yells, "Cheese war!" Where did it learn that? Doesn't matter. The merchant slices his cheese. It oozes dramatically. The Roman slices his. It crumbles like dry satire. Both offer samples. A brave senator volunteers to judge. He tastes the Roman cheese first. Nods. Earthy. Honest. Smells like defeat. Then the Carthaginians. He gags. Aggressive, smells like ambition and goat betrayal. No one knows who wins. No one cares, because suddenly the merchant demands satisfaction. "You insult my heritage," he slurs. The Roman responds by throwing a grape. It misses. The duel begins. Not with weapons, with cheese. Wheels are thrown, rinds hurled. Someone uses a breadstick like a dagger. The general shouts, "To the milk gods!" and joins in. The atrium descends into chaos. You rise, not to stop it, but to signal the musicians. Faster tempo. If this is happening, it will happen elegantly. A soft rain of curds and crackers sweeps across the marble. Guests duck and laugh. The poet hides behind the parrot stand. Eventually, the steward ends it. Gently, but firmly. Both men are escorted out, still yelling about dairy supremacy. You exhale. Guests applaud. You raise your goblet. And that, dear friends, is why I serve fruit. It's absurd, it's uncivilized, it's perfect, because nothing says Roman success like a party so wild even the cheese got violent. You notice it too late. The music is playing. The wine is flowing. Someone is arguing about whether the moon weeps when it rains. You're halfway through a joke about provincial senators when a soft crack breaks through the hum. It's not loud, but it's decisive, like a whisper with teeth. You look towards the far corner of the atrium, and there it is. The statue of Apollo, all 6 feet of it, tilting, slowly, tragically, like a tired hero surrendering to gravity. And beneath it, Flavia's husband. Of course. You freeze. Time freezes. Several guests notice. A few gasp. One whispers, "Oh no." You whisper, "Not now." The statue tips, wobbles, begins its descent with the agonizing slowness of an imperial scandal. It falls, shoulder first, grazing a fruit bowl, knocking over a candle holder, and then, divine impact, right into the back of the grain merchant's chair. He lurches forward, screaming in surprise more than pain, and lands face first in a bowl of fig paste. The statue cracks across the base and rolls dramatically toward a pillar, where it stops, head tilted, as if ashamed. Silence. Even the parrot doesn't speak. Flavia, to her credit, does not scream. She simply stands and pulls her dazed husband upright, using exactly 2 fingers. He is covered in fruit. His dignity leaks down his chin. The philosopher mutters, "Apollo abandons us." You consider running. You consider blaming the goat. You consider pretending you don't live here. But instead, you stand, raise a hand, and say, "Well, I suppose we now know who Apollo sides with." Laughter. Uncertain, but growing. Guests begin murmuring. A few clap. The general shouts, "A true Roman party. Something must fall." Crisis. Survived. Barely. Cassius appears. "The base was cracked," he whispers. "Moisture from the vomitorium." You nod, already calculating the cost of repairs, and bribes and emotional compensation fig baskets. A servant is dispatched to remove the remains, carefully. The statue is bundled in linen and carried off like a wounded soldier. You refill your goblet, sip slowly. Later, Flavia passes by. "That statue never liked him," she murmurs, then walks on. You stare after her, unsure whether that was flirtation, vengeance, or divine prophecy. Either way, Apollo is out, and dinner continues. He was fine an hour ago, tuning his lyre, smiling politely, wearing sandals that didn't match but somehow made it fashion. Then came the wine and the cheese duel, and the poet's 3-song serenade to unrequited figs. Somewhere in the chaos, the musician slipped away, quietly, gracefully, invisibly. Until now, you hear the splash first, then a faint melodic twang. You rise, push past a drunk senator humming the anthem of the legions, and there, in the center of your garden, is your musician, floating in your decorative fountain like a man communing with Neptune. The lyre is still in his arms. Somehow, half of his robe is submerged, his eyes are closed, his mouth is slightly open, as if mid-verse. A fig leaf floats past his head like a curtain call. Guests begin to gather. Cassius appears at your side. He's not dead, he offers, just meditating. You squint. He's snoring. Cassius shrugs. A musical nap. You approach, gently, cautiously, like one approaches a sleeping panther. You crouch, Tap his shoulder. He shifts, groans, lifts his head slightly. Encore, he mumbles, then slips back into unconsciousness. Guests are now openly laughing. The poet is composing a haiku. The parrot shouts, "Soggy bard." The general takes a sip of wine and mutters, "We've all been there." You sigh. "Get him out," you say. Slaves step forward, trying not to wet their tunics as they lift the artist from the water. He shivers, coughs once, and says, "Art is sacrifice," before promptly vomiting into a flower pot. You announce, "He will return for the finale." They applaud. You pray he forgets where he is. The fountain is drained. The lyre is rescued. The guests settle back into couches with the relaxed posture of people who have witnessed someone else's public breakdown and are now free to judge it with empathy. You, the host, sit down again. You close your eyes. You open them again, because the parrot is now mimicking the sound of someone drowning. Loudly. The night is far from over, but the soundtrack has officially changed. At first, you don't notice. After all, people at Roman banquets disappear all the time, to the garden, to the vomitorium, into a side room with someone they shouldn't be in a side room with. But then Cassius reappears, his brow furrowed and his tone unusually low. "We can't find the senator's cousin." You blink. Which cousin? The important one. That narrows it down to two. Both politically volatile, both known for getting lost at events when drunk, bored, or preparing a speech no one asked for. Still, a missing guest is no small issue. Not in your house. Not with this crowd. You discreetly ask around. "Have you seen Tiberius?" Blank looks. One guest shrugs. He was by the mosaic, admiring the leopard. The leopard, for its part, seems calm, which is either comforting or suspicious. You scan the atrium, you scan the garden, you check behind the fountain, just in case he pulled a musician move. Nothing. Cassius organizes a subtle search. Slaves check the wine cellars, the servants' quarters, the rooftop terrace where guests sometimes sneak off to complain about the garum. Still no sign. And now, people are whispering. You hear snippets. He seemed agitated. Didn't he argue with the merchant? I saw him slip something into his wine. Gossip flares like oil on a flame. You feel your stomach twist. Then someone suggests, half jokingly, fully disturbing, "Check the parrot." The parrot blinks. "Where's Tibby?" it says. You freeze. Cassius looks at you. That wasn't in its vocabulary yesterday. You resist the urge to scream. Eventually you find him. Not dead, not kidnapped, just asleep, curled beneath the dessert table, hugging a broken amphora and muttering softly about tax reform. You exhale so forcefully your sandals squeak. Two slaves gently rouse him. He blinks, coughs, then declares, "I dreamed I was a senator." "You are a senator," someone says. He weeps. Back in his seat, wrapped in a fresh tunic and sipping mint water, he insists on recounting the dream in excruciating detail. You pretend to listen, everyone else pretends not to leave. You glance toward the parrot, which tilts its head and says, "I found him." You begin to suspect the bird is smarter than at least 5 of your guests. Later, Cassius leans in. "We should lock the storage rooms." You nod and maybe lock the guests in. The sun has officially gone. The oil lamps are lit. Shadows stretch long and soft across the atrium walls, and the moon is a perfect disk overhead, mocking you. This is the part of the evening that separates good feasts from legendary ones. Unfortunately, it also separates logic from madness. Something shifts in the air when darkness falls over a Roman villa. Decorum loosens. Inhibitions collapse. Wine tastes sweeter. Secrets come easier, and chaos becomes inevitable. The parrot won't stop talking. It's repeating snippets from earlier conversations, out of context and much louder. Did you see his sandals? She's not his real wife. Cheese to the face. Each line is a social landmine. You've tried covering its cage. It bit the curtain. Guests begin to wander. Someone is attempting to debate the legality of ghosts. A group is dancing, sort of. Another is inventing a drinking game based on togas. The general is topless. The goose is missing. Yes, the goose is missing. Cassius appears, pale. It flew into the garden, took the flower wreath. Did it bite anyone? You ask. Only the flutist. He's fine. You nod. You don't have the energy to pretend to be shocked anymore. Someone lights incense that smells suspiciously like something not legally defined in any scroll. Laughter echoes too loudly. Two guests are arm wrestling with oil-slicked forearms. The philosopher has begun lecturing the statue of Minerva, who, for her part, is mercifully silent. You pass by a corner and catch a glimpse of Flavia, laughing softly with the dancer. You look away before she sees you. Or maybe she already has. You can't remember if you're chasing closure or just preserving illusion. And then the real disaster hits. A lull. A terrifying silence settles. Brief. Dangerous. Like the space between thunder and lightning. You know what follows a lull at a Roman feast. Someone is about to make a declaration. A drunk senator rises, goblet in hand. Let us play a game, he slurs. Truth, or dare, or confession. The crowd groans, laughs, cheers. You sink into your couch. The night is far from over, and you are trapped inside it. The lamps are low, the garlands are wilting. The guests are too tired to duel, but too drunk to leave. It's time for the closing toast, a moment meant to wrap the night in a neat ribbon of dignity and gratitude, which is ironic because there is no dignity left. You rise, slowly, carefully, toga rumpled, hair half-wrecked, your face frozen in the kind of smile that says, I'm having fun, and not at all counting the ways I'm dying inside. A slave places your goblet in your hand. It's warm. Of course it is. The crowd hushes. You clear your throat. To friendship, you begin. Easy. Familiar. To the gods. Obligatory. To an evening we will all remember, if not fondly at least, vividly. Laughter. Scattered, tired. Someone claps, someone hiccups. The parrot shrieks, "He lied!" You pretend not to hear. You nod to your steward. The bribe circuit begins. This part is not official, not written in any etiquette scroll, but it's crucial. While the guests murmur and stretch and begin the slow process of pretending to help with cleanup, Cassius makes his rounds. A silver ring to the senator's wife, a sealed amphora to the merchant's brother, a discreet nod to the poet who expects to be published next week. These gifts aren't thank yous, they're insurance. Because tonight may have gone well, or it may have gone terribly, and either way the gossip starts in the morning. You don't bribe people to lie for you. You bribe them to lie better. Meanwhile, someone throws up behind a curtain. Two lovers are caught embracing near the lemon trees. A tunic is discovered in the fish pond. No one admits to owning it. You raise your goblet once more. Rome is eternal. May we all survive to see it tomorrow. They cheer, weakly, but it counts. The closing toast is not about sincerity. It's about surviving long enough to pretend sincerity happened. You sit back down and feel the exhaustion in your bones like the weight of 100 censuses. The guests will begin leaving soon, one by one, pretending they're still sober, pretending they didn't make that comment, that mess, that mistake. And you, host of Rome's most dramatic dinner, will smile and nod until the last goblet is drained and the last lie is told. Then, finally, silence. The last guest stumbles through the doorway, waving farewell with a half-empty goblet and a full heart of scandal. The doors close. The latch drops. Silence. Then you sigh. Not a polite sigh. A deep, body-shaking exhale. The kind that feels like shedding armor after battle. You look around your atrium. It's a battlefield. Wilted petals. Stained cushions. A fig mashed into the mosaic like a tribute to forgotten gods. The statue of Apollo, still wrapped in linen like a defeated boxer, leans in judgment from the shadows. You are alone. Almost. Cassius appears, holding a list. "Damage assessment?" he asks. You nod. The tally begins. 1 curtain burned. 1 tapestry stained. 2 amphorae of wine vanished. 1 goose missing. 1 senator's cousin rediscovered. The fountain needs scrubbing. The musician needs sobering. The host, you, need a new stomach, a new name, and maybe a brief exile. Cassius says, "They'll talk about this for weeks." You nod. Will they talk well? Cassius shrugs. They'll talk. You wander through the remains of your own triumph. Fruit rinds, shattered plates, a single sandal on a statue. You wonder whose it was. You wonder if they even noticed it's missing. A slave begins sweeping. Another collects goblets with the efficiency of someone who's seen worse. The parrot mutters something about figs and betrayal. You throw it a crust of bread and hope it forgets everything. You pass the couch where you sat beside Flavia. It smells like perfume and regret. You pause, then keep walking. You reach your private chamber, remove your sandals, collapse. Not onto a bed, just the nearest pile of pillows. Sleep doesn't come, but silence does. And that, for now, is enough. You hosted, you survived. And tomorrow you will hear your name spoken in the forum, in the baths, in whispered corners, not as a politician, not as a philosopher, as something far more terrifying. A successful Roman host. Dawn hasn't broken yet, but the reckoning has. The wine is gone, the guests have vanished, and now the numbers begin. Cassius sits beside you at the long marble table, where hours earlier a goat was paraded and a senator confessed to lighting his toga on fire for spiritual freedom. Now there are just scrolls, ink, the cold, exacting math of excess. 2 amphorae from Sicily, Cassius begins, 3 from Thrace. Imported honey, candied lotus. The sugar sculpture of Vesta, now partially destroyed, was double the budget. You nod, you knew, but hearing it aloud is like being stabbed with a silver spoon. The fire juggler required hazard pay after the curtain incident, he continues. The statue of Apollo will need restoration, possibly replacement. The musician demands a new lyre, claims the fountain damaged the soul of his strings. You don't respond. You're too busy adding things in your head and subtracting years from your lifespan. Cassius continues. Also, bribes, political gifts, discreet compensation for the senator's cousin who claims trauma, not to mention the parrot feed. You blink. We buy special feed? He likes dates, Cassius says simply. You look around your villa. The most beautiful room in your estate now smells like fermented figs and ash. You notice a stain on the marble that wasn't there before. Garum, wine, the tears of your dignity. Estimate, you ask. Cassius hands you a final scroll. You unroll it, then re-roll it, then consider eating it just to avoid seeing the number again. It's not just expensive, it's catastrophic. A year's worth of income evaporated into laughter, scandal, and goat grooming. And yet, you know it was worth it. Not for joy, not for celebration, for status. Because in Rome, wealth is not what you save, it's what you destroy beautifully. Cassius stands. You'll need to sell something. You nod. The vineyard? He hesitates. The good one. You close your eyes, you breathe. Tomorrow, you'll meet your banker. Tomorrow, you'll spin the feast as triumph. Tomorrow, you'll convince everyone it was intentional, strategic, unforgettable. Tonight, you'll sit in silence, and count, and calculate, and cling to the hope that your reputation is now so inflated, no one will notice your fortune is not. Cassius waits until you're halfway through a much-needed moment of silence before delivering the final blow. And, of course, he says, clearing his throat with theatrical delicacy, this wasn't the major celebration. That's still next week. You freeze. The what? He gestures calmly toward your personal calendar, a wax tablet still stained with dates, names, and a smear of something that might be squid ink. The Saturnalia banquet. Your name's on the forum wall. Invitations went out weeks ago. You stare at him. The Saturnalia banquet, the big one. The one with the public seating, the live music, the 7-course service, the parade, the dice games, the costumed servants, the drunken carols, the ritual chaos. Who approved that? You whisper. You did, he replies, with great enthusiasm. You proposed a reenactment of the rape of the Sabine women staged with shadows and puppets. Remember? You do not, but the vague horror of that sentence tells you it's probably true. You slump back into your chair. I don't have the coin. Cassius shrugs. You didn't have the coin this time either. You stare at the remnants of last night, the stained marble, the broken garlands, a roasted pear still somehow uneaten, sitting like a judgmental ghost. And now, another feast. Bigger, louder, public. Can we cancel? You ask. Cassius shakes his head. You already hired the gladiator poets. You close your eyes, because of course you did. You wonder how you'll survive it. Not just financially, socially, emotionally. You wonder what absurd disaster awaits next time. A lion? A duel over soup? The emperor? You think about fleeing. To Greece, to Gaul, to the nearest fishing boat with no witnesses. Instead, you stand. Because in Rome, the feast never ends. It only escalates. It's over. Not metaphorically, not socially, actually over. The guests are gone, the wine is spilled, the leopard has been retrieved. The parrot, after hours of muttering phrases like, "never again," and "cheese war champion," has finally gone quiet. You stand alone in your villa, surrounded by the wreckage of opulence. The floors are sticky. The air smells of sweat, incense, and betrayal. Every pillow is out of place. Every jug is empty. The moonlight seeps in like judgment. You make it to your sleeping quarters, barely. You step over a fallen curtain rod, nudge aside a broken sandal, and collapse, not into your bed, but onto the nearest surface that resembles something soft. A stone bench, cold, hard, slightly damp from condensation. You don't care. Your back screams, your head pulses. Your feet are swollen, your mind spinning with leftover phrases from the poet's third ode and the senator's drunken tirade about fiscal reforms. You close your eyes and try not to dream of figs. Just as you begin drifting, a thought stabs through your exhaustion. Did anyone ever find the goose? You open one eye. Listen. Nothing. Maybe it escaped. Maybe it's roosting in the tablinum. Maybe it started a new life in the forum, running a profitable fruit stand. You smile slightly at the thought. Then you hear a soft rustle, a low, throaty honk. You don't react. You don't move. If the goose is here for vengeance, so be it. Let it strike. You're too tired to care. And yet, nothing happens. No feathers, no flapping, just silence. You drift further. The bench, though made of stone, becomes a throne of defeat. The weight of your toga wraps around you like a shroud. You finally surrender to the night. You've hosted a Roman banquet, survived it, endured it, and if the gods are kind when you wake, no one will remember the parrot's voice, or the cheese duel, or the fact that someone never claimed that lone, floating sandal. You sleep. You dream of normal things, like chairs and plain bread, and a future without poultry-related public shame. You wake sore, dry-mouthed, barely human. The atrium is dim, the light golden and cruel. Cassius stands nearby holding a tray with water and something that used to be bread. He looks tired too, but not as broken. The reports are coming in, he says. You're the talk of the Palatine. You groan. Good talk? He shrugs. Talk. You sit up, regret it, sit back down. He continues. They said it was unforgettable. Lavish, reckless, poetic, possibly illegal in 3 provinces. You nod slowly. That tracks. But then he adds, one senator called it a living metaphor for Rome itself. You frown. What does that even mean? I think it was a compliment, maybe. And that's when it hits you. No one cared about the planning, the wine selection, the pyramid of candied pears. They remembered the chaos, the spectacle, the fall of the statue, the rise of the parrot, the philosopher arguing with the fountain, the cheese duel, the dancer who might have been a spy. And they loved it. Because Rome doesn't want perfection. It wants theater, madness, blood in the garum and honey on the figs. Rome consumes its hosts. It chews them up and spits them out as legend. You hosted a party, yes, but what you really did was survive a performance. And now your name is known, your house is whispered about. Your parrot? Quoted. And you? You're still standing, barely. Cassius places a final scroll on your lap. It's an invitation. From Marcus Rufus, he says. He's hosting next month. Wants you to attend. Wants your advice. You blink. Why? Cassius smiles. Because you've become the standard. You laugh, then you cry. Then you ask for more bread. Because you've learned the truth. Being a Roman host isn't about wealth, or control, or even survival. It's about burning so brightly they remember your name, long after the goose is gone and the last lyre string breaks. Rome eats its hosts, but if you're lucky, it burps your name afterward.